So how do you know that you're not overpaying for services? Let's go to the conversation because Leah and I talked about that today. How do I know that I'm not overpaying for services, right? This is a really good one. This one I've actually blogged about in the past and have talked about mostly in the realm of like what we do, which is the video side of things. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about this.
Something that I always try and keep in mind is that, it's really hard to plan a wedding, by yourself. So this is when you're in that beginning phase and you're trying to, source down all your vendors, that's a great time to, ask your married friends and family for referrals. Start there. You have to do your research. So let's say you're looking for like a bakery to get your cake from. Do your research. Ask, the people what they were looking at. Did they go for cake? Did they do something else? And then kind of dwindle it down. Shop around. I mean, you wouldn't go and buy your wedding dress on a whim, I would hope. You would shop around. You do your research. That's my biggest advice. Shop around. Don't be afraid to ask, what your friends and family have done. They might even say, hey, this is what I did. Don't do that. Here's what I wish I would have done. And those are like nuggets of gold right there. And at the end of the day, remember your budget. Kind of think about, what are you willing to splurge on? Where should you be saving? So that even when you fall in love with something, after shopping around, you're not setting yourself up for some disappointment.
Absolutely. But let me ask you this. So then how do you know, and this is one that I've always, it's always interested me. Like, how do you know when you're paying too much or you're paying too little for something?
That's a hard question.
Right.
Before you sign something, before you put down that deposit, you really need to have a list of all the things that you're going to be provided. When it comes to, photography or videography, like you should have a pretty decent list of what's included in that fee. So if you think maybe that you're overpaying, you should circle back and say, well, what is included in this price? It's easy to just say like, oh, well, I'm going to take your pictures. Well, this seems like a really big amount for some picture taking. So what all goes into this? You can see a breakdown of how many people will you have there? How many hours is it? Does this include your engagement session? Do you get any prints or a book included in this price? Before you sign or, put down a deposit, make sure that you just have an idea of what's all included. If that number seems really high compared to the other, because you've shopped around at this point, right? So make sure, you've got good numbers. They all kind of seem to match up in terms of, the services provided. Ask questions. Ask a ton of questions. And if you think you're underpaying, you should probably ask for that list too, just to make sure.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. So we run into this all the time. So, actually, there were two phases to my company. So the one phase was before the economic crash in 2008, where like our rates were like, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for a wedding film, right? And then there was everything that happened afterwards. And what happened with the wedding video industry is that the barrier to entry was very, very low. So you could get started after like 2009, 2010. You could get into the industry cheap. I mean, you could pick up everything you needed for like maybe $2,000, just to get started, right? So a lot of people jumped in and like, and in some ways it was good. It moved the industry because a lot of people who didn't have the ability to do it did get in, and they started creating, really interesting and, stuff that looked really, really good. But then you had a lot of people get in who were horrible, right? And so what happened was you just had this flood of videography companies, that was opening up. And then as time went on, a lot of them would drop off and drop out. And then you kind of got down to a few. Now we have a national presence, so it's a little bit different. And for us, because we do that, we're able to offer our services at a rate that's not cheap, but that is, not as much as some other companies. So if it's one guy and kind of does it on, does the wedding video stuff on like the weekends, but he's like doing corporate work or commercial work during the week, then he might charge, $4,000 or $5,000 just to do it because it's going to take up a lot of his time and it's just him, For some of our partners, like we're overpriced, right? So for like, there are some markets where people think that we're like super expensive. And there's some markets where people think we're really cheap, which is the craziest
That's
thing.
That's true. It all depends where you're at.
Right, exactly. It all depends on where you're at, And so, like, especially, like, for our California partners, like, we have a partner in San Francisco and a partner in Orange County. Like, they're always like, okay, what's the catch? Because everything out there is super expensive, and they all think that there's a catch. I'm like, it isn't. It's just that we have one price for everywhere that we're at, But then we'll go into, like, a place like maybe, I don't know, like Florida, some areas of Florida especially. Like, we have partners down there, and they'll be like, why are you guys so expensive? We're like, we're not, so it's one of these things where it just kind of depends on where you're at. When it comes down to making sure that you know what's in that contract, that's so important. And it's amazing, and maybe you've noticed it, but I get it. Like, I don't fault our clients for this at all, because a lot of times you're booking these services like way in advance, like it's 1 to 2 years, and you're sitting there going, okay, what did I buy from you guys?
Sure.
And even though that they're looking at their contracts, they still want to have a refresher, and that's no problem, and I'm always happy to answer that. But I am always surprised at like where people like just don't know how to find their contract, they don't know what's in their contract. I don't mind the questions, I don't mind anything at all, but just it's one of these things where like I always am surprised how many people just like don't read their contracts, And there was an event planner I used to work with a long time ago, and she would talk about it all the time. She'd be like, people don't read their contracts. They never read them, which is crazy to me, because like even simple things like turnaround time, whether it's photography or video, especially anything that's happening after the wedding, like that's got to go in the contract. I mean, we put ours in there. We're advanced. We're like at 90 days, which is pretty good. 4 to 6 months for video is pretty much the standard. And there are companies, I know a guy who's a great guy and he does terrific work, but he's like, he tells his clients it'll be ready when I get it to you. Like literally that's his thing, which my clients would never go for. But nevertheless, it's one of those things where you got to get it in there, because the horror stories of photography and video isn't necessarily the day of stuff. It's not even necessarily the work itself. It's when they got it, or the lack of communication, and they had no idea when the stuff's supposed to show up. Because what's going to happen is you're going to go to like Thanksgiving, and your family, assuming we're away from social distancing, your family is going to be like, where's your stuff?
Right.
And you're going to be like, I don't know, if you don't know when it's coming, you're going to be like, I'm not sure, we haven't received anything back from them. And then, they're going to be bugging you about it. Maybe you have a parent that's going to be bugging you about it, or a family member that's going to be bugging you about it, and they're going to be on your ass about it, And then you go to Christmas or the holidays or Hanukkah or whatever it may be, and you go to that and you're with your family again. It's the same thing. Did you get your stuff yet? Well, no. Well, when are you going to get it? Well, I don't really know. Well, how can you not know when you're getting your stuff? And all of a sudden, people are on you, because we know that happens. And so having that turnaround time in that contract is key, because even if you're like, yeah, well, I'm supposed to have it like in January or February, at least you have an answer to give, and it's just less anxiety that you have to deal with. One less thing you got to worry about. So get those turnaround times in those contracts. It's very, very important.
That is so important. I'm glad you brought that up. We actually have some friends who got married last March and are still waiting for their photos and their video, which just blows my mind. Your first anniversary, and you're only working with your sneak peek photos. So understand what you're signing, and that goes for just a good lesson in life in general.
Oh yeah,
don't sign it until you read it.
I know a guy. So I used to work in sports years ago, and I know a guy who played for the Bears, and he is best friends with, I'm going to leave the guy nameless, both of them nameless, but with a guy who's like going into the Hall of Fame for the Bears. It was a name that everybody knows. They both stood up in each other's weddings, and he stood up in that guy's wedding. It was down in Florida. They went with an event planner, and she gave him an array of people that she works with, and the video team, the Hall of Fame guy booked. And so my friend, when his wedding came around, booked the same video team, only to find out my friend who was getting married a year later, they didn't even have the Hall of Famers video done. And so he was talking to his friend, and his friend's like, who'd you go for with video? He's like, oh, I went with the same guys you did. He's like, no. He's like, we don't have our stuff yet, and it's a year later. And so the video team shows up at the wedding. The Hall of Famer is there at the wedding standing up, and he's like, hey, guys, where's my stuff? I'm like, oh, we're getting it out to you. And then my friend was like, sure enough, after the wedding, I was going through the same cycle. And at that point, because the guy had money to do it, he was like, you know what, just keep it. I don't even care. And just send me the raw footage, and we'll figure it out from there. At the time, he didn't realize that I also did weddings. So he was like, I wish I would have known that. We just hired you, to come out and do this, and it's crazy. Now, on the flip side of that, though, I will also say that, sometimes it is the client. I'm just going to say, because you're waiting for stuff. You're waiting for some sort of approval. You're waiting for, some sort of because I know what we do is after the wedding, we have an editor's list that they fill out, and they let us know music they want to have included. And also, some things at the wedding that may have, that they really want to make sure is included, or maybe some things at the wedding that happened that they don't want to have, and they like some speech that they don't want to have. And, we are sometimes waiting for them to turn that in. And then once they turn that in, then the clock starts on getting the stuff out, within that time frame. So, there are occasions where, it may have taken 9 months to get it out, but we're waiting 4 months for, after 4 phone calls, waiting for, them to get their stuff in. So with studios that are consistently delivering late, you can't hide it. All you gotta do is read the reviews on these guys, and you should pick it up.
That's so funny, because I had mentioned earlier, you take referrals from your friends and family, but make sure, they enjoyed their services as well. And if it's a vendor that you really have your heart set on, and you've heard some maybe not so great things, ask them about it.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
make sure they know that you know that like you're concerned about it. It's at the forefront of your mind, but you love their work. You want to make sure things are going to happen timely and in an appropriate manner and all that good stuff.
The good vendors, the really good ones, will address all those issues. No problem. I mean, and not everyone's perfect 100% of the time. That's just the way it goes. You can't please every single client, and nor should you necessarily. I mean, you could try for sure, but you're not going to. I mean, you can't please everyone. So you're going to get a few stinkers once in a while. That's just the way it goes. But the key on this end of it is knowing how to work with them, how to handle it. And if you really take care of that client, then you're not going to get that bad review. I mean, if even if you just give them back their money sometimes, you're like, okay, well, I'm sorry this didn't work out, and that's fine. Like, that's not going to happen, you know what I mean? Because you can't please everyone, and that's expected. But if you do have a couple stinkers up there, on the review site, I definitely recommend that rather than just, if a client's like, man, I love their work, but God, these 2 reviews are bugging me for some reason, ask them about it. For the most part, our reviews are very good, but we've had a couple where I'm kind of, that I look at them and I'm like, ugh. But I've had people ask me about it, and I'm just straight up. I'm like, look, this is the situation on this wedding, that was their point of view, but we have a whole other point of view on this, and this is, our end of it. And the majority of the time they end up booking, because you're being honest with them and you're, and you're addressing it rather than just trying to dance around it or just kind of, avoid it.
People that are comfortable talking about, bad reviews or in general, people in general, they do things that they're not maybe proud of or, something slipped between the cracks. Showing that you can talk about things, as a person in general means that you're growing and you're learning from in many ways. And,
absolutely.
The quickest way to learn anything is to reflect on it, move forward with a grain of salt. Obviously, you never know the situation behind a review, but it takes just a really honest person to sit down and talk about it, address it full on, and I think clients respect that.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And the thing, too, to remember about reviews, too, as you're looking around and you're looking at pricing and trying to figure everything out, is that it's difficult for a vendor to get people to leave good reviews. So if you have really good reviews, that's really good. It is. Because people are so quick to leave a bad review, right? But, because how many times you go to a restaurant or how many you go to, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to give them a good review, and then you get busy and you don't. I do it all the time.
Sure. You're in a food coma and you're like, oh gosh,
right, exactly.
and
I get busy or I forget about it or whatever. But if you're pissed and you are like, and you're going to get on that review board and you're going to leave that, that negative review. But the thing is, I think that, when you see vendors, especially the ones that have been around a long time, and you see that they have a lot of reviews and they have not that many bad ones, it's actually a really good sign, because what that means is one of two things. It doesn't mean that they're perfect 100% of the time. What it means is that in the times when they're not, they take care of the client. And that's something that's very, very important to know. You have, from a vendor side, about 12 to 24 hours to fix something like that. You really do. And it's all about communication. If they're trying to get a hold of you and they, a lot of times the review will be the last thing that they do. It's not always the first thing. It's the last thing. Usually it comes from a lack of communication, right? So if you see a lot of bad reviews, it's probably tied into a lack of communication, meaning that they've called, they've texted, they've sent an email, they've been sitting around, they can't, they're trying to get, some sort of response and they're not. So now they're going to leave a review in the hopes that all of a sudden, the vendor's going to jump on it. And that's typically the trend for that. And we know that. So that way, if for some reason there's something, someone's not happy about, with something that we did, you better believe I'm on the phone with them within 12 to 24 hours. Email inbox is almost like a general inbox for the company. We have a ton of it that comes in. And I have an assistant who operates on it with me. And she is on a text thing with me. So if I ever have anything, that comes up that I know right away, and I can jump on it immediately,
That's great.
And fix it, which is exactly what you want, from a vendor for sure.
So what do you think? How do you know when you're not overpaying for services? Leave a comment and let us know. Also, don't forget to subscribe, turn on those notifications, smash that like button, and I'll see you next time.